These are the best rares in the new Lorwyn Eclipsed set. So if you're going to pre-release this week, these are the rares that you want to open and play in your deck. And I'm going to be talking about best rares in the context of limited. So if you're playing standard or commander, this video is not for that context. And stay to the end because I'm going to be covering the tier 2 rares as well as the trap rares, which I think a lot of people are going to think are good, but are actually going to make you lose games at your pre-release. And of course, if I miss any rares or you disagree with me, let's talk about them in the comments and have a friendly debate. Now, the first bomb rare of the set is Curious Colossus. It does cost 7 mana, but it's a game-altering play, and especially, my pro tip here is that you should attack first, and then you can play your Curious Colossus afterwards. So everything that took damage that turn will become a 1/1, and then it'll have 1 toughness, so then it'll die. So it could also be a board wipe. If not, you can just make sure that you nuke all of your opponent's creatures, and they lose all of their abilities as well. And also keep in mind, this targets the opponent, it doesn't target the creatures, so they also can't react to it. The next bomb rare is Oko, one of the planeswalkers in the set. This is one of the transform planeswalkers, and you can only transform it at the beginning of your first main phase. So you will not be able to transform it until the next turn, but it does have a way to protect itself with its +1. And then the backside is pretty busted, especially the -3 ability. So the typical play pattern is you'll play it, and then you will +1 it, hopefully nuking one of your opponent's creatures, keeping it alive. You don't want it to take any damage, ideally, because it'll have 4 loyalty. And then on your next turn, you pay 1 green, flip it over, and then you would -3, and you would get 2 3/3 Elks, which is totally busted. And keep in mind, as you can see here, the only way to plus Oko is to transform it back to the blue side, especially because it's so cheap and it'll force your opponent to throw resources at it. And even if they do manage to kill it, by then you probably will be in a really good board state because they've wasted so many of their cards. Next is Irdu, Carrier of Dawn. It looks like a dragon, but it is not, and notably it is an elemental, and there is a creature type that matters in this set, and elementals is one of them. It's also one of the transform cards, but honestly both sides of these are super busted, as you can see here on the screen. It's a must answer threat. Now, it doesn't have a ETB ability, so they do have 1 turn to try and answer it, but you know, if they don't have an answer, not only is the front side just a 5 mana 5/5 flying lifelink, so even if you're not playing white-black, you would still have a really good card that basically ends the game on its own. And then the backside obviously is where things get really, really silly, but you do need to have it survive 1 turn, but it's still one of those game-ending altering threats, especially with lifelink. Even if you were behind, this thing basically catches you back up. Next is Bitterbloom Bearer. This is the new version of Bitterbloom. Not as good, obviously, because it's a creature, so they can interact with it and kill it, but it does produce 1/1 flyers every single turn. And keep in mind, it does have flash, so you can play it at the end of your opponent's turn. And then the next one is Aurora Awakener. This is a cool one. It is 7 mana, so a little bit expensive, but the green archetypes in this set do have a bunch of ramp, and most of them are slightly more defensive decks anyways. So you most likely will try to get to the late game if you want to win either way. And then this does cover the new set mechanic, which is Vivid, which basically explains itself on the card. It cares about the number of different colored permanents that you have. But basically, it's a 7 mana, 7/7 trample that lets you put permanents into the battlefield directly, and obviously anything with a strong ETB is going to be a bomb. And it's only 1 pip of green, so in your pre-release and sealed, try to splash this even if you're not in green. Next is Abigail, Eloquent First Year. This is a hybrid card, so it can go in a lot of different decks, makes it super flexible, and also you don't want to play this on curve, obviously. You want to play this maybe on turn 3 or turn 4, and then you can put 1 of these counters, or sorry, 3 of these counters, flying, first strike, and lifelink on one of your own creatures. Now, worst case scenario, you can remove the abilities from one of your opponent's creatures, but most of the time you're just gonna make a game-ending threat on your side of the board. And also, this thing also has a bunch of keywords as well, so if you can pump it or put other +1/+1 counters on it and modify it with equipment and stuff, it's also going to be really good. The next one is one of the commands. A lot of the commands are on my list here, so don't be surprised. There's nothing too creative about them, but they're all really good. All of the commands are basically 2-for-1s, and there's not a lot of board wipes in this set. This is one of the only board wipes that's kind of decent. It does 2 damage to everything, and it also lets you draw 2 cards. So imagine getting to kill some of your opponent's creatures, and then you get to draw 2 cards. That in itself is pretty busted. And then, of course, if you have an elemental, you could just copy your elemental and draw 2 cards. Next is Bree of Clan Stouthorn. I'm probably going to get roasted in the comments for the pronunciation on this stuff, but this is 4 mana, 4/4, but its activated ability is totally busted, as you can see here on the screen. Lets you play cards off the top of your deck and gives you flying and lifelink threats. So this is definitely something they have to answer. It itself doesn't have an ETB ability, So obviously they have one turn to try to answer this, but again, if they don't, the game's pretty much over. Next is Emptiness. This is a hybrid white-black card for 6, but if you want to in a pinch, you can evoke this out. Now keep in mind, you are going to need the double pips. So if you just pay 1 white and 1 black, you're going to get nothing when you evoke this. So you're going to need either black-black or white-white, but either of these two modes are really good. And obviously, if you can do both of these, then that's just a game-ending play, because you get to get a 3/5, you get to reanimate one of your mana value 3 or less, and you basically get to kill a creature. So that's a built-in 3-for-1 right away. Next is the second planeswalker in the set, and that's Ajani Outland Chaperone. This one is not as good as the typical Ajanis that we get, but it's really cheap. It's only 3 mana, comes in with 3 loyalty, and right away it makes a token that can protect itself, which is what you really want in your limited planeswalkers. So this thing is really, really good, and obviously if your opponent attacks you the turn before, because they didn't know you had Ajani, when you play it, you can always -2 it and then destroy one of their tapped creatures. So that in itself is already going to be almost a 2-for-1. And then, of course, with planeswalkers, they just have to waste so many resources to try to get this off the board that even if they do, you should be far ahead with your card advantage. Next is one of the other busted commands, and that's Grub's command. The typical modes you're going to want to choose with this one is destroying a target creature every single time, obviously, and then you can either try to mill some cards and put the goblins in your hand. The red-black archetype is all about goblins anyway, so you should have a ton of those, and it's not limited to just one. So however many you mill in those 5, you can put all of them back in your hand. Or if you've got a decent board state, then you go with the +1/+1 gain haste on everything and try to just end the game that way. So this is also a built-in potential 2-for-1. Next is Sonar, Innovative First Year. The stats on this one, not great. 4 mana, 2/4, but if this lives 1 turn, as you can see, that's a kind of a theme with a lot of these creatures here. If they live 1 turn, then the next turn you just get to draw basically 1 or 2 cards every single turn, which is absolutely busted. And then if you have more colors besides blue and red, then you can look at even more cards. But this is just a infinite value engine on top that your opponent must answer. And if they don't kill it within the first turn, you're probably going to get at least 1 card, maybe 2. Next is Vibrance. This is one of the other incarnations that's super busted. Both of these modes are very good, either the red or the green. And if you get to play both of them, then you basically also get a pretty sweet 3-for-1. And it does help you fix in the early game as well if you need to splash your other color. And keep in mind, the red-green and red-blue archetypes in this set are all about vivid and trying to play as many colors as possible. So you're going to need ways to have fixing. Next is Wistfulness, one of the other incarnations. Sorry, there's so many and they're all really good. So they're all on this list, basically. This one is overstated compared to the other ones. It's a 5 mana 6/5. Now, its abilities aren't as good as the other ones in a limited context. There aren't a lot of enchantments or artifacts that you typically want to blow up. So most of the time, you can just play this in your blue deck because it's going to be a 5 mana 6/5 that lets you draw 2 and then discard 1. And then, yeah, worst case scenario, if you don't have any plays on turn 2, then go ahead and double blue this out and then filter your draws. And looking at 2 cards is kind of a lot. The next one I think is a little bit debatable. A lot of the other content creators have called this out as one of the biggest bombs. I thought this would be tier 2, but I've been convinced by some of the people at my LGS that this is potentially tier 1. So it's Thunderflock. It's 9 mana on paper, but it's got a way to reduce its mana cost. And almost all of the elementals are pretty large, so you can get a pretty big discount. And there's also changelings in the set, which count for all creature types as well. So you're never going to pay 9 for this anyways. And then when it does enter, you get to bounce all non-elemental creatures back to their opponent's hands. So in best case scenarios, you're playing against a opponent who does not have any elementals or shapeshifters, and then you just bounce their whole board, and now you have a 5 mana 5/5 flyer. But the only downside here is if you're playing a mirror match against a blue-red deck, which also has elementals, then this is not going to do too much. And if they have, 1 or 2 shapeshifters, then you're not bouncing too much either. But in either scenario, maybe you'll get some additional value from the ETBs of your creatures coming back in when you replay them. And it's still a 5/5 flyer, which can also win games on its own. So that's why I've been convinced to kind of keep this in my best rares section. Next is Brigid Klachin's Heart, and this is one of the cool transform cards as well. This one just has a lot of value up front. It's pretty good on rate, so 3 mana 3/2, but when it enters the battlefield you get a 1/1, and then your next turn you get to flip it over for 1 green, and then it produces a ton of mana based on all the creatures. And then every single turn you just keep flipping it back and forth. So it's a great value engine, and the Kithkin color pair is green-white obviously, but Kithkin cares about going really wide, and it cares about the number of Kithkins that you have. So this gives you a unlimited Kithkin engine. And also, you can have really explosive turn 4 plays when you transform and flip this over, because you could potentially have access with up to like maybe 4 additional mana that turn. Next is Slumbering Walker. It's a 5 mana 4/7, but it does enter with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. This is the new mechanic in the set, which is basically called Blithe. But here, with this one, what you want to do is have something in your graveyard with power 2 or less. So it's not mana value 2 or less, it's power 2 or less, which is why this is a built-in 2-for-1. It enters the battlefield as a 2/5, but at the end of your turn, it will be a 3/6, and you get to reanimate something, which is pretty good, built-in 2-for-1. And then there's Lockmare. It's a slow value engine, but it's pretty cheap, and it does grow as the game goes on. And then you can continue to add -1/-1 counters on it with other cards with Blithe. So this in itself is really good. Next is Spinerock Tyrant. This is probably going to be, I think, one of the more expensive cards in the set, I believe, in terms of money value, but it's 5 mana for a 6/6 flying with Wither, which is super busted on its own already. It does not have an ETB, so it does need to survive 1 turn, but if it does, your instants and sorceries all get Wither, and you get to copy them, which is absolutely insane. And then there's Gloom Ripper. Now, the green-black archetype in this set is all about elves and milling yourself. So this actually fits perfectly into that deck. You get to basically pump something on your board, and then you get to kill something on your opponents based on the number of elves you have in your graveyard. And keep in mind, you're going to have a ton of elves, because that's what green and black are all about. Next is Endblaze Epiphany. This is an X spell instant. It's nothing flashy, but it is a 2-for-1. So you deal X damage to something, you get to kill something, and then when it dies, you exile the number of cards from the top of your library equal to its power, the power of the creature that you had killed, and then you get to choose a card from among them, and then you can play that until the end of your next turn. So built-in 2-for-1, but keep in mind, the cards that you have exiled do stay exiled, that they don't go into the graveyard. And then the next one is one of the other incarnations, Deceit, the blue-black one. The ultimate value, obviously, is if you get to cast the full cost, then you get to bounce something and have your opponent reveal their hand, and then you make them discard a non-land from it. You may not actually get that ability too late, or get too much value from that, because on turn 6, your opponent actually may not have anything in their hand. In either case, worst case scenario, you can bounce something for 2, or you can look at your opponent's hand early on and then remove a non-land. And playing this on turn 2 actually does have some value, because you get to see all the cards in their hand. You get to plan out all your turns as well. Next is Tristan's Command. This, not surprising here, you're going to choose the Destroy Target Creature effect, and then you can either bump your whole board if you can end the game there with +3/+3, or you can create a copy of a target elf you have, or just return 1 or 2, by the way, 2 permanent cards to your hand. This one is a little bit more expensive because it's 6 mana compared to the other ones. I think the other commands are like 4 or 5. And keep in mind, this one is a sorcery, so I'm not sure why it says untap them for that last ability, because yeah, it's sorcery, not instant, but it's still really, really busted. Could be like a 3-for-1 almost. And then next is Champions of the Perfect. You do have to behold an elf when you do it, but green has tons of elves and so does black. But look at this. It's a 4 mana 6/6. Crazy, right? And then if it lives a turn, whenever you cast a creature spell, you draw a card. Keep in mind, it's not enters. So something that makes a token, for example, does not let you draw a card. But when this leaves the battlefield, so that could be bounce, exile, or removed, then you get to put the elf back in your hand that you had exiled. By the way, if you're finding this video to be helpful, make sure you click subscribe down below, because I post weekly videos to help you get better at Magic. Now let's go into my tier 2 rares. These are rares that I think are good depending on how you build your deck, how the draft goes, what your pool looks like in your pre-release, and they do require quite a bit of setup, but the payoffs could be worth it. Now, the first one is Disruptor of Currents. This is a pretty beefy mana war. It's got Flash and Convoke, so you're almost never going to pay 5 for it. But it's a 3/3 and it bounces another target non-land permanent. You could target your own as well if you wanted to get like an extra value off your ETB. But it's in my tier 2 rares just because it's fine. It's not a game-ending threat. It's not going to get you back up or anything like that. So it's just fine. Next is Champion of the Weird. Now, as you read this one, take your time. It is really tricky. I had to think about where I would put this on the list, and if it would even make the list at all. It's a 4 mana 5/5, so it's overstated, but you do have to behold a goblin and exile it. Again, the red-black archetype cares about goblins and has tons of goblins. The Blight 2 means you have to put 2 -1/-1 counters on your own creature. But when you do that, after you pay 1 life, your opponent then has to put 2 -1/-1 creatures -1/-1 counters on their creatures. Your opponent does get to choose where those -1/-1 counters go, not you, which is why I was kind of iffy on this card. But one of the cool designs of it here is the Blight ability here for Champion of the Weird. It doesn't cost any mana. All it costs is life. And so what you could do in a worst case scenario, you pay 4 mana and you behold one of your goblins, then this comes down on the battlefield. You can pay 3 life, Blight 6, and you can put everything on Champion of the Weird. Champion of the Weird will die, obviously, but then you'll get your goblin back. And then your opponent has to put 6 -1/-1 counters amongst all their creatures. So at that point, they're probably going to lose 1, maybe 2 creatures as well. So in that case, it's basically a 2-for-1 if the board is set up that way. So that's why I kind of have it here in the tier 2 list, because depending on the board state, worst case scenario, you put them all on Champion of the Weird and then you get your goblin back. Next is Sig Wanderwine Wisdom. I wanted to say Wandervine, but it's Wanderwine Wisdom. This is one of the transform cards for blue and white. Blue and white archetype cares about merfolks. This one can't be blocked, which is cool. It doesn't have like a game-ending ability, but it is really annoying and does get you some incremental value. So when it enters, it says target creature. When it deals damage to a player this turn, you draw a card. So when this enters on turn 2, even though it's unblockable, it has summoning sickness. So you don't want to target itself, you want to target something else. So usually if you play this on curve, you're not going to get to draw a card right away, which is why it's in my tier 2. But when you get to transform it on the next turn, then you get to give it protection from each color, and it'll get to attack, and then you flip it back, and that's when you can start to draw cards. So it's a really slow value engine, but it will demand a removal spell from your opponent. Next is Doran, Besieged by Time, and this is a cool design. It's a 0/5 on paper for 4, but it's one of those that cares about the toughness more than its power. Read the ability here. Whenever a creature you control attacks or blocks, it gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the difference between its power and toughness. So that means it goes both ways. So if its toughness is more than its power, which is, Doran here, it gets +5/+5. But also the inverse happens as well. So if you have a 3/1, for example, then it gets +2/+2, even though the power is greater than the toughness, which is something I think a lot of people are going to miss, which is why this card is really good. But it is 3 colors, and not a lot of the cards have that much of a power difference, but it can make a massive difference on your board state and have an immediate impact, and it just basically changes the game. Next is Goliath Daydreamer. This one could almost be in tier 1, but it's in tier 2 because it requires some setup. Number 1, it needs to live a full turn, and you need to have enough instants and sorceries where you can get value from it. So if you can cast 1 removal spell and then you basically get to copy it, then it is really good, right? But you may actually end up in scenarios where you just play this and then your next turn you don't even have a removal spell or an instant or sorcery, because maybe your deck is like a mid-range and you have a lot of creatures. So that's why I have it down here in tier 2. It obviously could end the game on its own, but also you have to build your deck a certain way. You need to have the right cards in your hand of the card type. So tier 2. Next is Tam, Mindful First Year. This is kind of like a worse version of Mother of Runes that I have on here, because it's not protection, but it is hexproof. And so basically your opponent needs to kill Tam first. It can't give itself hexproof. So they're going to have to kill Tam first, use the removal spell on that, and then they can kill something else. So that's why it's in tier 2, because it's only good if you have other good threats that you need to protect. Because on its own, it's just a 2-mana 2/2. And then I have Marlin Fey Ascendant here on the right. It's a cool one, but you do need to have quite a bit of elves or fairies on the battlefield. So this is like a build-around card. Definitely can have huge value and win you games, but it's going to take a lot of setup. And if you have enough elves and fairies on the battlefield already, I have a feeling you're probably winning the game. But it's still a 5-mana 4/5 flyer that gives you some abilities, so that's why I have it down in tier 2. Next is Selfless Safe Right. This one is a cool you know, built-in 2-for-1 because you get to flash it in with Convoke as well, so it's not always going to cost 5. And then you'll ideally blank a removal spell, or you'll help your creature win a combat trade that it was supposed to lose. And that in itself is a 2-for-1. The body itself is not good. It's a 4-2, which means 2 mana cards in this set can trade with it. So that's why it's all the way down here in tier 2, but it is a built-in 2-for-1. Next is Kin Binding here on the right. This is an interesting enchantment. It's 5 mana for, it's kind of a small effect, which is why I have it down in tier 2. Creatures you control get +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures that enter the battlefield under your control this turn. Now, this thing does make its own creature at the beginning of combat. So, worst case scenario, 5 mana, enchantment, you get 1/1/1 Kitkin, so it pumps your whole board by +1/+1. And then the next turn, if you have something that can, if you just have one other creature, then you'll basically get +2/+2 on your whole board. So this does require some setup, right? You already need to have a board state where you can comfortably attack on turn 5 and not have to worry about dying on the crackback. But the reason why I still have it here as not a trap card is because worst case scenario, you attack with all your creatures because they're bumped, and then you get a blocker now. You have a 1/1 token that's expendable that you can just block with when your opponent tries to crack back. Now let's talk about some of the trap rares that I think a lot of people are going to open up this weekend at the pre-release read and think they need to put these in their deck, but they're actually going to make you lose some games. So the first one is Chronicle of Victory. This is one of those Archetype Matters cards. It is good, right? It's +2/+2, first strike, and trample, and then whenever you play a creature of that type, you draw a card. So you would think this is Lorwyn. It cares about the creature types, right? There's, you know, elves and elementals and Kithkin, so this should be really good. But in your limited decks, it's going to be really hard to get a critical mass of creatures that are all of the same creature type. And keep in mind, this is turn 6 already. You may not even have that many cards left in your deck, and you may have been trading off creatures as the game goes on until turn 6 anyways, just so you maybe wouldn't die. So what's the real board impact? Maybe it gets to pump 1 or 2 creatures. So that's why I don't think it's that amazing, and you'll have to count your creatures and see what your pool looks like this weekend. The other card that I want to talk about here as a trap is Winnowing. So this is a sorcery card. You think it's like a board wipe in a way, and it's cheaper because you get to convoke it out, and then whatever you convoke will die, but you should read it very carefully. So for each player, you choose a creature that player controls. Then each player sacrifices all other creatures they control that don't share a creature type with the creature that you chose. So no matter what, your opponent still gets to keep something. And if they have changelings or other things like that, then even more stuff is going to live. And that's why I don't think this is actually that good. It's not a true board wipe. Next is Bloodline Bidding. This one is expensive, 8 mana, but you do get to convoke it. But here's the conundrum and why this card doesn't really work, because it's a conflict of interest. So you're going to return all creature cards from your graveyard of one type. As I mentioned with the previous card, one of the problems in Limited and pre-release is that you may not get a critical mass of just one creature type. And also, they all need to already be in the graveyard, which means you would need to mill them or have them trade off and die, which in itself is some setup. And in order for this not to cost 8 whole mana, you need to convoke, which means you need to also have creatures that are on the battlefield that are still alive, not in the graveyard. I don't think it's going to be that great. There's going to be some games where obviously you win the game, but there's going to be some where this is just a 6 mana bring back 2 creatures, which may not be that great. The next trap card I want to talk about is Dawnhand Dissident, and this card requires just way too much setup because you need to have enough creatures that can survive blighting 3 times so that you can then play the creature cards that you had exiled with this. And it's just going to take way too much setup. And if you're able to put that many -1/-1 counters on your creatures and them still live, I don't know how you would even still be alive in the game. Next is Moon Shadow, and I'm probably going to get roasted in the comments, so let's debate this. I don't think this is that great of a card, especially if you draw it late. This is only good, in my opinion, on like turn 1 or turn 2. Beyond that, this card is not that awesome. And also, you're not going to get that many mill cards probably in your pre-release. And then, do you really want to take mill cards as a part of your draft either? That's why I'm not a huge fan of this card. It's only good early, and then it's a pretty terrible top deck. Next is Collective Inferno. We just had one of those similarly in the Avatar set, and that one was actually pretty good because of Firebending was just a busted mechanic. But here, this one has Convoke, so, you know, a little bit better type, but it's not worth it, right? You don't want to take a whole turn off just to double the damage from one creature type. And as I mentioned, the creature type stuff is just going to be way too hard to pull off in Limited. Next is Sapling Nursery. This one has affinity for forests. So this card is only going to be good if you're playing mono green. So if you're in draft, this card is probably a little bit more valuable because you can actually do that. Your sealed decks are never going to be mono green. So this card is going to cost a lot of mana. So if this card costs 5, then how often are you going to get to landfall after turn 5? And keep in mind, there's not, other than the fetch lands, which are rares, by the way, there's not a lot of ways to trigger landfall multiple times each turn. There is Evolving Wilds, but that's basically it. Next is Spry and Mighty. So for this one, you choose 2 creatures you control, you draw X cards, and the chosen creatures get +X, and trample until end of turn, where X is the difference between those chosen creatures' powers. This is 5 mana, and the setup for this is so difficult. You need to have 2 creatures that are still around, that are still viable, that are decent creatures, and they have to have a difference between their powers that's great enough to warrant playing a 5 mana card that can draw you maybe 2 cards and give you +2/+2. So this is a trap, don't play it. So that's my opinion of the best rares, tier 2 rares, and all of the trap rares in the new Lorwyn set. So when you go to your pre-release this weekend, make sure you are playing all of these cards if you open them. And put down in the comments again if you disagree with me and what should be added or removed from this list. And also, before you go to pre-release this weekend, you're going to want to watch this video that I'm putting up right here, which is going to break down all the archetypes, the combat tricks, and everything you need to know before you go so you can actually win more games. And if you're planning on drafting this set, you're definitely going to watch this other video right here.